everyone, and welcome to a new direction. My name's Jay Izzo, and oh man, do we have another great show for you. Absolutely fantastic show. Every now and then I run across a book. Having done this is my 10th year of doing this show, and I read a book a week for this show, as you all know. And every now and then I get a book that just hurts my brain. This was one of those books that my brain got hurt. Not in a bad way, but it just it bent it a lot, where I had to really think through what the author was saying, and had to really go, I don't know. I got to think through this a little bit. I think he's right. I'm just not sure. And I got mind bent, and I went through it again, and my brain still was exhausted because it just really, really challenged a lot of things. The book is called Nobody is Smarter Than Everybody. Secondary titles: Why Self-Managed Teams Make Better Decisions and Deliver Extraordinary Results. My guest today is going to be Rod Collins, who wrote that book. I'll be giving his bio, but this book is going to challenge convention. If you have in your head, in your business, that the way you've always done business is the way that you should do business, and the way that you lead business is the way that you should lead business, and continue to doing so. And you may be, how do I put this? You may be a victim of your own success in the way you run your business, because this book challenges the convention of the way we do things, especially as we lead, and how things are led, how decisions are made, how performance decisions are made, strategy decisions are made, how power is distributed, and how we have to look at things in a little bit different way. And it makes complete sense. My brain hurts, even though it makes complete sense. So we're going to dig in with Rod, and so I would like to introduce you to him. Rod Collins is an author, keynote speaker, and leadership coach. He is a leading expert and thought leader in the future of business transformation. Rod's books, blogs, and speeches inspires through their use of storytelling and leading edge ideas. With extensive experience in management, sustained financial success, and market growth, Rod understands that a rapidly changing world isn't necessarily unmanageable. It just needs to be managed differently. Under his leadership as the chief operating executive of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Federation Employee Program, one of the nation's largest, most successful business alliances, the company experienced its greatest 5-year growth in its 60-year history. He's an award-winning author. His books include Wiki Management, Leadership in a Wiki World, and his latest book, Nobody's Smarter Than Everybody, which spotlights 3 companies who go from startups to market leaders. Outstanding book. He's an international speaker. Hire him. He's really, really good. He's appeared before thousands of people around the world. His keynotes talk about emerging technologies such as blockchain, the IoT, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence. And he's outstanding, and he talks to a wide range of companies. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, and welcome to the first time to A New Direction, Rod Collins. Rod, welcome to A New Direction.
Thank you, Jay. Good to be with you.
So we're going to dig into this book, because this book is challenging. It challenged every convention that probably most people who listen to the show when it comes to business. And you actually start the book with taking us on a time machine journey. And you ask us a question in this time machine journey. If we were in a time machine and we couldn't get back, and we got dumped off in the 18th century, and you suddenly were alarmed by a troubling thought, how easy will it be for me to find work in my current profession? And I think if we were to ask ourselves that question, for many of us, we'd go, it doesn't exist. Because in fact, when I graduated college and even graduate school, what I do today did not exist in the world. So it was something that came out of that. So that question became very big for me, because I started to think about that. But then I started to think about something else. The things that I do today, podcasting, which didn't exist when I was in grad school, coaching didn't really exist when I was in grad school. Just none of it existed, whether it was, team coaching, just sports psychology work that I do. None of it existed at that time. And so here we are today, and I started thinking about this question. what's it going to be like 5 or 10 years from now? And I say it that way because you're correct in what you said. The technology is moving at such a pace, we can't keep up with it. We're not able to really do that, adapt as humans individually. And I started to put myself the future, and I like to think I've always been an early adapter of technology. I'm embraced it. I always have. I've never been afraid of it. It's always been one of my friends. But I didn't think about how we have to maybe run our business differently as a result of incoming and embracing these technologies. And this is where you say some things that started to get really, really uncomfortable. And I think they'll be uncomfortable for people. In 2004, Facebook didn't exist. Twitter was still a sound. The cloud was still in the sky. 4G was a parking place, and applications were what you sent to college. Rod, I get it. Technology is moving at a pace, but in the current business structure that we have, businesses aren't keeping up because we still run in a hierarchical way where we've got CEO, a bunch of C-suite people, and under them are a bunch of management people who have supervisors who have this level, and everybody's got a title, and then we have a whole bunch of people who work. And if we want to make it in this digital society, that structure has to change, doesn't it?
It does. It does. You know, you summarized, I think, a lot of the technological changes. The example you referenced with the thought experiment brought people back to the agrarian age. The agrarian age lasted 8,000 years, the agricultural revolution. So if you were born in the 1500s, 1600s, the world you were born into is the same world you died in, for all practical purposes. Nobody today, none of our listeners believe that the world they're going to die in is anything like today. And I think the great anxiety a lot of people feel is we're going to see tremendous change and we don't know what's necessarily coming. And one thing that isn't changing, we're seeing all of this, what I would call digital technological change. We're not changing our fundamental human technology. Most organizations continue to be run as top-down hierarchies, the way they were in the late 1800s, when the Industrial Revolution had fully taken hold in the Western world in particular, and gave us corporations as we know them today. I think a lot of our listeners would be surprised to learn that in the mid-1800s, the typical size of the typical business was 4 people. We think in terms of working in large organizations, that's a relatively new phenomenon that came in the late 1800s. And for the last 150 years, we've essentially been running organizations the same way. I contend the reason I point out nobody is smarter than everybody is that one of the things about top-down hierarchies is you are limited by the capacity of the single human brain. Because when the CEO has autocratic authority, what we're trying to do is hire the best brain to be at the top of the organization to drive the decision making. And I would suggest that that is now obsolete. All of us are concerned about AI. Every business is focused on AI. And the great promise of AI is it's going to get us beyond the capacity of the single human brain. And so if our technology is going to move in this direction, our human technology, how we organize ourselves needs to do that. And so there's an alternative management model to the top-down hierarchical structure, and it is the peer-to-peer network. And the peer-to-peer network, its great value is it gets beyond the capacity of the single human brain. And in the peer-to-peer structure, you are able to bring together the thinking of many brains. And there are organizational processes and procedures that we write about in the book that companies who use the peer-to-peer network model that they employ. This enables them to collate their collective intelligence very, very rapidly. And that's going to be important for organizations to do because that's eventually what AI is going to do. AI is going to be able to bring together human collective intelligence. So we need our human organizations to mirror our digital organization.
Hmm. So you say something here in this first, another thing in this first chapter. You've already said a whole bunch. We've already talked about in the first chapter. Which, by the way, by the way, this book is maybe 150 pages long. Okay, but it is so challenging. I'm telling you, it is so challenging. It took me literally days to read it because I would get through a chapter and I would have to sit on it and really think through what Rod was saying because I had to put it together and my brain was just working overtime. Even in my sleep, it would work overtime when I would be thinking about what he just said. And of course, you know, I have my own biases. I'm first to admit I have my own biases. And I also know that I recognize that because I'm trying to become even more self-aware of my own biases. And there's parts of me that want to say, oh, no, he's wrong. But every time I kept coming back to go, no, he's right. And here's one of the things I felt like he was really right about. You wrote you said mass collaboration will define the digital age, like mass production defined the industrial age. And you said the digital age is very different. First, it is customer driven. Keeping the boss happy is no longer good enough. Today, we work for the customers or consumers, and these shoppers, they have just much more knowledge. So the days of working for your boss and just stick to your job are over. Today we work for the consumer. And as I thought through that, I go, yes. And I'm cheering you on and I'm going, yes, 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 that's true. But the problem is that there comes in a hierarchy type of situation, again, you know, the CEO and work your way down, is that the furthest person away from the consumer is the person who's making the decisions.
So let me describe. Let's get very practical and tangible with our audience because you really have hit on something. Um, if you're going to make intelligent decision making in the marketplace, and it's funny, we're dealing with one right now, right today. Okay, Cracker Barrel is moving back because its customers said we don't like the change in the logo. And the CEO had this whole idea of how to proceed, and that's being pushed aside. And the customers always win. But it points out the importance of how you make decisions in companies today. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I served as the chief executive of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Federal Employee Program. It was a business alliance of 39 separate companies. And we had a hard time getting everybody, all these organizations on board so we could move forward. And it was a real challenge. And when I was, before I was chief executive, I was put over the operations and I was asked to turn the operations around. We were doing okay, but we were really not in the growth mode we wanted to be. And the light bulb went off. And I said, you know, we've been running this business like it's a hierarchy. And we bark out orders. We happen to be headquartered in Washington, D.C., and everybody argues with us. Maybe we need to recognize we're a network and lead very differently. And one of the tools we used in order to get consensus, agreement, and decision making among the 39 separate companies is I invented a meeting format. And I said, you know, we're not just going to have, in typical organizations, people meet by levels. The top people meet with the top people, mid people, and so on. Now, we're going to get a microcosm of the business in the room in the presence of about 50 people. We're going to have senior executives and people we hired out of college 2 weeks ago in the same room with the same voice. We're going to have people who are close to customers. We're going to have people who are building our systems. We're going to have people who do the marketing, when I look across those 50 people, I want every single aspect and dimension of this business represented. And without going into a lot of detail, the second thing we did is we're not going to have debates. Debate is the typical conversational format used in most organizations. I think it's the lowest form of human interchange because I'm in the mindset of how is my idea better than yours, and I never listen to you. So we designed a meeting structure in which all voices could be heard. We would meet in small groups. We would have people fill out post-it notes. And for example, we might have ideas on post-it notes, and we might have on the board maybe 70 ideas. And we would ask people, call out items that look like they're the same. So we get down to a mutually exclusive list, maybe of about 30 items. What happens is when the frame of reference is, how is this idea different from that idea? You have to listen to both ideas, whether you agree with them or not. And so, in the course of getting from 70 ideas to 30 ideas, people have really visited a lot of the ideas when they normally don't do that in debates. And then we use a dot voting mechanism, and we would invariably in these sessions identify, it was usually four, sometimes five, but most times four, the four most important things we need to do to solve the problem. And a surprise to me was, now you got to keep in mind, for 20 years, we haven't gotten these 39 organizations ever to agree to anything. And from the very first time we ever employed this mechanic, we had unanimous agreement. That stunned me. And what stunned me even more is over the course of the next decade, we would use this format for reaching our most critical decisions. And I didn't do a single session where all 40 to 50 people in the room didn't agree. And so we are able to get there, but we were digging into ideas in a much deeper way. And by tapping into the collective intelligence dynamics of the group, we were able to come up with better decisions. Now, with everybody on board, the other thing that surprised me is it translated outside the room from the 50 people in the room to the other 39 organizations. That was a huge surprise. And I have to admit that when we first started doing these, I was a little nervous because there were big leaps in thinking that were coming out of these sessions. And when we saw that it was being accepted out in the field among people who weren't there, I sat back and said, how is this happening? And I realized this is the difference between a peer-to-peer network and these particular mechanics and the top-down hierarchy. Because we had a microcosm of people in the room and all points of view there, as things would come up, people would say, no, you can't do that. Well, why? Well, you need to take this into account. Instead of 3 variables, we have 4 variables we need to handle. And by identifying the important variables and doing those up front and then building around that, when it went out to the general population, everybody who had a concern saw their concern was addressed in the solution. And that's the power of a network. In the hierarchy, somebody at the top says, we're going to do this. And as many times people who are not, lower in the organization, who weren't heard from, no, it's not going to work because I know something you don't, and I have no way of letting you know. And you're telling me to just suck it up and do it. And this is why 2/3 of people are disengaged at work because their voices aren't heard. And so by building this meeting format where we're going to have a microcosm of the business in the room and all possible perspectives there, and also I need to add, whether I agreed with them or not. And so I literally was inviting people into the space whose ideas I did not agree with. But I said their voices have to come in here because who am I to think I know it all? And so this is the power of networks. Let me just close this part by pointing out there are 4 categories of knowledge. There's what we know, there's what we know we don't know. There's what we don't know we know. And the most dangerous of all, there's what we don't know that we don't know. Hierarchies work very well in 2 of those 4 spaces. We know what we know, and we know what we don't know. In the space of what we know, that's why we hire people. In the space of we don't know, we hire consultants. But what hierarchies are horrible at, which is dangerous in a time of great change, is they don't uncover what we don't know. I'm sorry, what we don't know that we know. And the thing that really gets you, what we don't know that we don't know. Our collective intelligence workshops, as I would call them, would cause those latter two factors to emerge. And so we would discover we had knowledge we didn't even know we had by getting that microcosm of the business in the room in the course of the discussion. But a lot of times, by getting all these different perspectives and heads together and honoring all the voices, we were uncovering what we didn't know we didn't know. And when you do that before you assign the work, then things come in on time, on budget, high quality. And when we began to use this, every project we did was on time, on budget, high quality. Because what causes you to be not on time, to have low quality, is you didn't know what you didn't know when you started the work. Networks get that identified much earlier in the work process than hierarchies do. And in times of great change, that can literally be the difference between the life or death of the company.
Well said. As a matter of fact, you got somebody who just chimed in, who's listening and said, well said. I don't know what your real name is, but you go by Big Nam Antings. Thank you for chiming in on that. His name is Rod Collins. The book is called Nobody's Smarter Than Everybody. Why Self-Managed Teams Make Better Decisions and Deliver Extraordinary Results. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, got to give a little shout out here to my sponsors. Zoundy, if you're an author, publisher, listen, it's a game changer for audiobooks. I was speaking at a conference in Salt Lake City, and I had a code that I gave out to everybody in the conference could download a free audiobook copy of my book. And you go, why would you do that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Zoundy is the only platform right now that exists that allows me to get their email addresses and that I can interact with those people who listen to my book. And I can ask them questions like, what did you like? What did you not like? What would you like to see me write next? What would be of something that might be of interest to you that you've heard me say on stage? Whatever it may be, it is absolutely outstanding. And listen, you can get a special offer right now if you go to Zoundy, ZOUNDY.com/J, J-A-Y. You use my code J25, that's J-A-Y-25. You get special savings on being able to get your book on an Audible platform where you're going to be able to interact with your readers. So check it out, Zoundy.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, 40 years. They have been leading the industry in helping people transition in life. Listen, every place you've ever lived has been a life transition. They know how to reduce the stress in that. They've been helping thousands of people do that over the course of 40 years. They'd love to help you. Here's the thing. Check them out. I'm telling you, they are known as the legends of customer service. You don't stay around. They are bleeding edge technology. Small company, independently owned, not connected to a national company. You're going to get personalized service, I promise. Check them out, lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Rod Collins, his book, his latest book, by the way. Nobody is smarter than everybody. Why self-managed teams make better decisions to deliver extraordinary results. Rod, I want to get into this this whole peer-to-peer network because there's going to be a lot of resistance. As you and I both know, there's a lot of resistance, and I want to kind of shape things a little bit differently here to kind of help us walk through this with people who are kind of going, gritting their teeth, they're banging on the table, going, Rod, Jay, you guys are idiots. You don't know what you're talking about. But okay, I want you to think about this, folks. Just think about this. If you think about for a second, all right, 30 years ago, what the top 5 companies were, right? Do you know what they were? They were General Electric, GE, Royal Dutch Shell, Coca-Cola, NTT, which is Nippon Telegraph Telephone, ExxonMobil, right? Those are 5 of the most, some of the most. Here we are today. Do you know what the top 5 are? Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. What do they all have in common? They're networked. They are networking companies. They are gathering information and making networks. Now, let me ask you a question, listener. Okay. Do you really think that in a networked society, that one brain at the top of the chain is really going to be able to compete with networking companies if you don't have a network that you're relying on, a peer-to-peer network where you're utilizing all that power? Okay, I'm just asking you that question because I know you're resistant. Because I'm telling you, you know why I know you're resistant? Because I am somebody who believes that this is true, and yet I'm still resistant to it. I have to be honest about that. But it makes sense. If you want to, Rod, you talk about this. You know, there was the day where we go and all due respect, product and service differentiation was how we're going to compete. But if you're going to compete today, based on what we just said in the top 5 listed companies, right? You want to compete with the Googles, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Apples, and the Facebooks, right? Which are no longer the General Electric, Coca-Colas. This idea is got to fundamentally change, that we have to move to a more peer-to-peer network. So help us, just move us a little. It's a dramatic move, but kind of help us get a mindset around this, because our mindset is what we're struggling with here.
So let's talk about something that everyone in this audience is familiar with, and that's flying airplanes. Now, I've been around the block a bit, and when I first started working, we averaged 3 to 4 airplane crashes a year. And every time I traveled for work and got on a plane, I thought, I hope I'm not on one of the 3 or 4 that'll happen this year. In the early 80s, that changed dramatically. It is extremely rare to have an airplane crash, especially in the United States. Why? What happened? Well, the management model in the cockpit changed. And what caused it to change was an incident that happened in the late 1970s. There was a plane that was flying cross country. I believe it began in Boston, had a layover in Denver, and on its final leg, this is approaching Portland, Oregon. And it is a beautiful day. It's an unusually beautiful day across the entire United States. No weather systems whatsoever. As the planes are at 8,000 feet, the captain, who is functioning as the co-pilot, and the co-pilot is actually flying the plane, asked for the wheels down. And when the wheels go down, they're not sure that the right landing gear is locked. So they go into a holding pattern, and the captain got obsessed with, is that right landing gear locked? And there were 3 people in the cockpit. They were, in addition to the co-pilot, there was a flight engineer. And they're trying to very diplomatically make the pilot aware, we need to be focused on the fuel. But he's just riveted on this landing gear issue. When he finally decides, well, we better bring the plane in now, they run out of fuel, and the plane crashed. Now, because they did run out of fuel, there wasn't a fire, and most people survived. 10 people perished, 9 passengers, and the flight engineer died in that crash. Now, when the National Transportation Safety Board began to review the tape, they were puzzled. How the hell does a plane run out of fuel? That doesn't make any sense. Until they listened to the cockpit voice recorder. And then they realized the real cause of this crash was the top-down hierarchical management model. All the knowledge needed for a safe landing was in that cockpit. But the management model did not allow the voices of the other 2 pilots to speak up. And so they made a recommendation that was put into place. And every single airline crew at United Airlines, which was the airline where this happened, They immediately implemented this because they wanted to stop the crashes. And all the other airlines followed suit. And they trained all the pilots that when the captain is the leader, not the boss, and everyone is to speak up. You will not be you'll not be corrected or disciplined for speaking up. You'll be disciplined if you don't speak up. And so that whole culture changed. We saw the impact of this a few years later. Some people may recall there was a plane that lost all of its hydraulics. It was a DC 10. And there were three people in that crew, and they knew there was a pilot sitting in the passengers. They brought him in because we're going to expand the team. In the old days, you would never bring in another pilot who would challenge the captain. And the four of those were able to crash land a crippled plane. And 2/3 of the people were able to survive what would have been certain death for all passengers had they not shifted to this. And when they interviewed the captain afterwards and said, "How is it? It's sad that we lost one out of every three, but you saved 2 out of 3 lives. How did you do it without missing a beat?" He said, "Crew resource management," which was their name for the peer-to-peer network management model. He said, if we had not used this approach, we could have never figured out what we needed to do to get a plane down for a situation none of us was ever trained to handle, because nobody ever envisioned that a plane would lose all of its hydraulics. And so the next time you get on an airplane, okay, why do we have this incredible safety record? It isn't just better machines. That's part of it. But the real reason is the industry that has embraced the peer-to-peer network management model is the airline industry, and that is the model used in every cockpit. And so there you measure success in terms of lives saved. And so you can be, when you get on a plane, be thankful that they're not using the top-down hierarchy in the cockpit. Be thankful they're using the peer-to-peer network model.
And I'm going to point out something. I'm going to point out a psychological bias term here that you didn't say, but I want people to hear. When you tell that story, the first thing that jumped in my head, and when I read that in the book too, the story, I said, he anchored on one thing. And here's the problem with hierarchical types of management is that the head person is anchored on one thing, just one. They can get so anchored on this, I just need to, profitability. Maybe that's it, right? And they're just so focused on profitability, but they're not seeing how to get there. And so what they do is they've got this idea, this is how we're going to be more profitable. And instead of engaging everybody across to all levels of the organization, and we're talking about big organizations here, folks. We're not talking about, listen, we own a company that's 25 people. We're not talking about small companies. We're talking about giant companies here. But when they're so anchored on this one thing, whatever that thing is, right? They're not seeing how they can find a creative solution to the problem. Well, Nir Bashan, who was on the show, wrote a book called The Creator Mindset. And he has a quote in there that says, there is no problem that creativity cannot solve. Here's the problem. The problem is you aren't creative enough by yourself, but you have a whole bunch of people out there, if you put all their brain power together, are creative enough to solve the problem. That's the piece that struck me so strongly when I read the story, and I heard you say it again, is that you've limited and you talk about it, the part of the beauty of the peer-to-peer network is the creativity and innovation.
You remind me of the worst day in my career. I remember it because I remember the exact date because it was May 8th, 2002. And the reason I do it was my daughter's 21st birthday. I worked in the health insurance industry. We were putting in a brand new system. Uh, it had been 17 years since we made a change before, and you get every day you can out of these because in the health insurance industry, those systems are complicated. And on that day, I came into the office. I had been the chief executive maybe about 4 or 5 months. And I had two executives sit down and say, we ran our first test of the new system last night. Now, this is May 8th. It's going to be live on January 1. And it failed miserably. But what's really terrible is we know the whole system doesn't work, but we don't know where the issues are in the 39 different organizations. We can't put together a corrective action plan. And I thought, oh boy, this may be the shortest tenure ever. And I went home and had a bit of a sleepless night after we had celebrated my daughter's birthday. And the next day I came in and I said, we use collective intelligence to handle problems. Let's do a variation of that here. And so I called a 3-hour meeting and I invited 40 people to the meeting. And I didn't just invite systems people, I invited all kinds of people, financial people, again, microcosm of the office in the room. And I put 4 flip charts in front of the room. And I put on the blue, green, red, yellow. And I said, what we're going to do over the next 3 hours is we're going to take those 39 organizations, which were actually 60 sites. So we're going to take these 60 sites and we're going to put them on these charts. Blue means if we forgot about them, they'll be fine. Green means they're likely going to be okay, but they may need a course correction along the way in building this system. Yellow is we got to hold their hands. And red means no matter what we do, they're going to fail because they're not going to devote the resources to it. And I said, there are 2 rules for putting these organizations on these flip charts. Rule number 1, okay, is nothing goes up here unless all of you agree, every one of you. Rule number 2 is you have to express your opinion even if you are a solo voice. And if you are a solo voice, I really want to hear from you because you may see something the rest of us don't. And rule number 2 is more important than rule number 1. Well, we did it. We got all those organizations on those flip charts. And I looked at them and I said, we're going to forget about the blue. They're going to be just fine. Those organizations, we can count on it. The green ones, we're going to check in here and there, okay, and have people assigned for that. The yellow ones, we're going on site. We're going to visit. We're going to put all our efforts into understanding these organizations and where they are. And there were 2 on the red list. I said, I'm going to call their CEOs because what their chief information officers have decided is this is going to fail. I'm not going to devote resources. So they are going to need I was going to take advantage of the hierarchy in that case. We're going to need them to tell them, you're going to put this in. It worked. I remember leaving that room and I felt tremendous relief. I said, I don't know what went on here. It's completely counterintuitive, but I am confident that this is going to work. Now, anybody who's familiar with the health insurance industry knows you have a lot of issues that have to be handled in the first couple of months, and a lot of them can be customer facing. And we were prepared for that. When we threw the switch on the following January 1st, we didn't have a single customer facing issue. The plan we had put together worked. I did supplement it with one other thing, and this is another way of networks. Every Friday at 3 o'clock Eastern time, we had a 2-hour session, and we set it at 3 o'clock so the people at Hawaii could be on it. And we had open lines. Anybody could bring up anything. Most organizations want to hide that. And I had told the staff, let it come through. I don't care if we look embarrassed in May or June. I care if we look embarrassed in December. And so just pull out of them. And what was amazing is we set up these calls initially for systems people, but over the course of weeks, all kinds of staff were coming on these calls, and they were open lines, and anybody was free to participate. And there were probably about 20 or 30 people who were the primary spokespeople for everybody. But I knew that people felt their voice mattered because somebody who I knew well, who never spoke up, pulled me aside at a meeting we were at and says, I want to tell you how much I appreciate those calls because I really feel my voice is heard. And I thought to myself, but I know you're not speaking, but that's all right. Somebody else was speaking that person's voice. What networks do is get all the voices heard. And that's a tremendous advantage because it lets you know what you don't know you know, and more importantly, what you don't know that you don't know. And in rapidly changing times, if you can identify those things, you have a tremendous knowledge advantage.
His name is Rod Collins. The book, Nobody's Smarter Than Everybody. Why Self-Managed Teams Make Better Decisions and Deliver Extraordinary Results. Outstanding. It is a mind bender. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to challenge you. I'm just being honest. But it is fantastic. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, sponsor Zoundy, audiobook platform, author for authors, publishers. Listeners, you can listen too, because what we'll do is Zoundy will get you a code or a link, and I can give away my audiobooks for free. And I love doing this at conferences before I go and while I'm there to interact, because I get their email addresses and I'm able to interact with those folks who are listening to my book. And I get to ask them all sorts of great questions that help me think about what I'm going to write next, or things that I could improve on in things that I did do that are maybe questions I should have asked or didn't answer. And I found that to be the most beneficial thing of Zoundy. So listen, check them out. Special offer right here through New Direction. Zoundy.com/J. That's ZOUNDY.com/J, J-A-Y. Use my code JAY25. Get a special savings on getting your book, your Audible book out there so that you can start interacting with the people who listen to it. I'm telling you, it is a game changer for all of us. It's absolutely outstanding. Check them out. Linda Craft Team Realtors, listen, love everything that they do. Probably one of the most impressive things I think about them is their website. Yeah, they have everything that all the other websites have when it comes to real estate. But here's where I think they make a huge difference, and that is this. They got a child psychologist to write How to Move with Children, a veterinarian to talk about how to move with a pet, right? They have all this information, and it's constantly coming at you to giving you great information that's not just that they're sharing openly. You don't have to sign up for anything. Just go to the website. Just go to lindacraft.com, and all of it is right there. So much information. A great show called Real Estate Right Now that they do, bringing on people who are talking about real estate matters that matter to you and I. Check them out, lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Rod Collins. We haven't officially announced our friendship, but I'm choosing to do that anyway, even though he hasn't officially done that. I do too, by the way, Rod. I'll be really honest with you. I want to jump ahead here because there was a part of this book that really, really jumped out at me, and it was in your chapter here on building teams of leaders. And we've talked about the heroic leader, that it's that archetype of that guy who comes in kind of like, a Lee Iacocca who comes into Chrysler and, right, he makes great changes and he did great things and, had a government loan. And by 1983, even before they had to all be paid back, he had it all paid back and turned Chrysler around. But typically what happens with these heroic leaders, they leave and the business just falls apart. It just typically does. This is where peer-to-peer networks go, okay, if you're running it this way, it actually is a legacy network. But what I want to get into is the leader part. And that was something that you did by taking a piece of Jim Collins' book. I don't know if you guys are any relation, because I almost called you Jim, just to let you know. I just almost called you Jim. But he analyzed these 1,400 companies and Fortune 500 lists from 1965 to 95, found that less than 1% of the companies make the leap becoming good to great. But what was most interesting to me was what were the leaders' uh, basically traits, two top traits that made them what they call level 5 leaders. And it's so paradoxical because it was personal humility and professional will that turn these companies around. And here's the thing that I think fits into this peer-to-peer network where I think you were making your point. You as a leader have got to have enough humility to recognize I don't have all the answers. And maybe my direction isn't right. Right? And then you have to have the professional will to say, because I don't, I'm going to go to this peer-to-peer network that I have at my this massive sea of knowledge and brain power that I have, that I'm going to make this work. Talk about this how the leader transitions to a humility and yet will-powered leader that combines this thing to create this peer-to-peer network.
So let me do it with a story. And it is probably the organization that has been doing this the longest. Now, our audience will be familiar. W.L. Gore and Associates, they make us a Gore-Tex. Bill Gore in 1958 is working for DuPont, and he thinks to himself, the best discussions happen in the carpool, not in the office. I'm going to leave DuPont after a 17-year career, and I'm going to design the company to be like the carpool all day long. And he says, the first thing I have to do is I can't be the boss. I just have to be a voice among the others. He starts the business literally in the basement of his home. And today I think it's in 30 countries around the world. It's about 10, 11,000 people. And this organization has never had a boss. And so Bill Gore himself passed away, I think, somewhere in the 1980s. So this company has kept this model alive decades past his passing. But I think he himself set the model for leadership. He himself was a humble man. And this may be a challenge for a lot of organizations because too many CEOs think it's about them, and it's not. And here's the thing, CEOs who think it's about them lose a lot of sleep at night because they're bearing more of a burden than any single human being can carry. Because somewhere in the first decade of this century, the world is now moving faster than any single person can process it. Lee Iacocca could not turn around Chrysler today. He could do it in the 80s. It was possible for single leaders to do that. And so what you have to recognize is my job is not to be a boss, it's to be a facilitator. And that's a harder job, all right? And not only facilitate it, but I have to keep the pace of the business going. We have to stay aligned with the marketplace. But it's not passive leadership. It is a proactive leadership, but it is proactive around I'm going to gather the collective intelligence of this organization as fast as possible, and I'm going to be really good at it. And if I'm really good at it, then we are going to uncover these unknowns. And I am going to sleep better at night. And I can tell you, you do sleep better at night. Because you've got a sense that I can trust the entire organization because I have a management model that allows that to happen. But it does require a tremendous change on the part of the leader. And moving from leader as boss to leader as facilitator is not easy. It is scary. I can tell you there were times where I was leading these collective intelligence sessions where they're going down a path and I'm dying. I'm thinking, this is horrible. This is wrong. We should not be going in this direction. There's a little voice in my head saying, Rod, you're supposed to be in charge of this organization. It's your job to step up. And I knew if I interject myself, it'll be all over the country within a matter of hours. Yes, Rod Collins believes in working together as long as you agree with him. And I can't risk that. And I'm so glad the first time this happened, I was so glad I kept my mouth shut and let the group go because I discovered we were on an interim point. They didn't settle there. They went from there to another place. And when they got to that other place, I was like, oh, I'm glad that I had the wherewithal to ride this through. And then in subsequent to that, every time I had the sense, oh, I think this is going down a bad road, I thought to myself, oh no, we're probably on the right path. We just haven't hit the destination yet. And I have to tell you, I was never disappointed. That's a whole different mindset.
Yeah.
I remember before one of these sessions, it was an hour, it was a minute before the session would start. The room is buzzing with 40 or 50 people. And this thought went through my mind. In the next minute, and over the next 2 days, we're going to work on the biggest business problem we have. I don't know what we're going to do. I haven't a clue how we're going to solve this. The only thing I'm certain of is I know by 4 p.m. tomorrow, we're going to identify it. And I'm dying to see what it is. And then I said to myself, how many chief executives begin a session with that mindset? And by the way, at 4 o'clock the next day, we did have a brilliant solution and it did work.
We've got a few minutes left here. I want people to also understand that the military has adapted to this too as well. Because you tell the story about General Stanley McChrystal when he was a part of the Joint Special Operations Task Force in Iraq in 2003. And he realized that the Al-Qaeda terrorists were using speed and adaptability to outmaneuver our troops. And it was because they were operating as a decentralized network.
Yes.
And you make a point, and that McChrystal came to was he recognized, General McChrystal recognized that it was going to take a network to defeat a network.
Yes. And he wrote a book about it. And I admire his transformation. I mean, he's leading the best military army in the world, and this network is getting the advantage of him. And so what he did is he set a network. Remember, I mentioned before we had telephone calls once a week while building the system. Well, he began to set up daily calls with a network, his network of people, and then they were broadcasting that out. And then the troops were aware that we needed to be able to operate on the fly. And when they shifted to this network structure and moved their leadership into that direction, again, leaders are not bosses, they're facilitators. They're getting everybody's voice in. You're doing it quickly. This is not a slow process. As a matter of fact,
Right.
when you operate as a network, it's counterintuitive. You move faster. I had a
Right.
saying, you slow down and move fast. So we would take 2 whole days to come up with something. That's the slow down part. But then at the end of the 2 days, we were moving fast, which is how you get to do things on time, on budget. When McChrystal made this transformation as a leader from being a boss to being the facilitator of this network, that's what led to their success.
We've done an hour, Rod. It's gone really fast. I've really enjoyed our time together. I hope you have.
I've enjoyed being with you, Jay. Thank you.
This has been a lot of fun. Please stay with me. You've been great. Well, before we do that, why don't you tell people how they can get a hold of you? Because people would like to probably hire you to speak, or would like you to maybe would like to also maybe go, hey, I need to learn more about this. How can they do that?
I have a website. It's rodcollins.net. And all my content is there. You can access my books. I have a Substack, and I'm really focusing on AI. And as we move into AI, we're really going to accelerate into this network world. But they can go there.
That's awesome. Stay with me, Rod. Hey, folks, this is a show. You know what I say to you every week? You're in control of 3 things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. The fact of the matter is, life will bring you challenges that you didn't expect, and you will be in circumstances that you don't care for, but you're still in control of your attitude. Your effort is tied to your excellence. So yeah, we may not have the same amount of gas in the tank, but you know what? You can be excellent with what you have. Choose to be excellent as you can today. And finally, we all get punched in the gut or punched in the teeth, and you get knocked down. Fact of the matter is, it's up to you to get back up again. And we need you to get back up. Why? Because you're worth it, and we want you on the team. I'll be back next week with another great guest, another great show. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. And I thank you. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, wherever you're at, listening to the show. Why don't you give us a 5-star review? We really appreciate it. It helps us out a lot. Tell your friends as well. Thank you so much. And as I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.